At 1:23 a.m., the ground shook, but almost no one noticed. Most of Europe was asleep. In a quiet Soviet city, windows did not break, sirens did not scream, and life seemed to continue as normal. Yet in that exact minute, an invisible threat was released into the air, one that would travel across borders and change millions of lives. April 26, 1986, began like any other day in Pripyat, a young city built to serve the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. Families woke up, children got ready for school, and workers prepared for their shifts. The plant nearby was a symbol of technological pride. Nuclear energy represented the future, progress, and control over nature. Few questioned it. Fewer understood how fragile that control truly was. During a late-night safety test, operators made a series of critical decisions under pressure. Safety systems were disabled. Warnings were ignored. The reactor became unstable within seconds. Then came a powerful explosion that tore open reactor number 4, exposing its core to the open sky. What followed was not just an accident, but the beginning of a global disaster. Radiation has no sound, no smell, no color. People in Pripyat gathered on balconies and bridges, watching an unusual glow rise above the plant. Children played outside for hours, breathing contaminated air. Parents felt no immediate danger. The city continued to live inside a lie, not because people were careless, but because no one told them the truth. Firefighters arrived within minutes. They climbed onto burning roofs and approached the reactor without understanding what they were facing. They wore standard uniforms, not protective gear. Many believed they were saving a power station. In reality, they were standing next to a nuclear core. Their actions prevented an even greater catastrophe, but the price was devastating. For more than a day, authorities remained silent. Information was controlled. Fear of panic and political consequences outweighed concern for human life. When evacuation finally began, residents were told it was temporary. They were instructed to take documents and essential items. Apartments were left as they were, meals unfinished, toys on the floor, pets waiting by doors. The promise of return was never kept. As radioactive clouds drifted across Europe, the truth could no longer be hidden. Radiation detectors in distant countries began to alarm. Scientists searched for explanations. Only then did officials admit that something had gone wrong. By that time, contamination had spread across fields, forests, rivers, and cities far beyond the Soviet Union. Hundreds of thousands of people were later sent to contain the disaster. They became known as liquidators. Soldiers, engineers, miners, and civilians worked under extreme conditions, often with limited information. Some were allowed only seconds in highly contaminated zones. Others stayed longer than they should have. Their work reduced the long-term damage, but many paid with their health. Entire communities disappeared. Villages were abandoned and erased from maps. Families were relocated to unfamiliar places, carrying trauma they could not explain. The psychological damage lasted decades. Trust in institutions was broken. The sense of safety was lost. Chernobyl exposed more than a reactor flaw. It revealed the danger of secrecy, the cost of silence, and the consequences of placing image above human life. It showed how powerful technology becomes a threat when responsibility is removed. Today, the exclusion zone stands frozen in time. Nature has reclaimed the streets. Buildings decay slowly. Wildlife moves freely through empty schools and homes. It looks peaceful, but the silence carries memory. It reminds us that mistakes do not disappear. They remain, waiting to be remembered. Chernobyl is not just a Soviet story or a Ukrainian tragedy. It is a global lesson. The disaster crossed borders without permission and affected generations who were not yet born. It asks a question that still matters today. What happens when the truth is hidden, and who pays the price? Remembering Chernobyl is not about looking back in fear. It is about understanding responsibility. It is about choosing transparency over control. And it is about ensuring that no society ever believes it is too powerful to fail. The long-term consequences of Chernobyl did not end with the evacuation or the cleanup. Years later, people began to understand that radiation does not disappear when the news cameras leave. It stays in soil, water, and the human body. Health problems appeared slowly, quietly, and often without clear answers. Doctors struggled to connect cause and effect. Families searched for explanations while living with uncertainty. Children born after the disaster grew up with its shadow. Some never knew their hometowns except through photographs. Others grew up hearing fragments of truth mixed with silence. For many, Chernobyl became something abstract, a word in a textbook, while for others it was a personal loss that could not be measured or explained. The international reaction also revealed deep weaknesses. Governments debated numbers. Reports contradicted one another. Responsibility was passed from one institution to another. The world struggled to agree on how severe the disaster truly was. This confusion did not come from lack of intelligence, but from fear of accountability and fear of consequences. Chernobyl changed how the world talked about nuclear energy. Some countries slowed their programs. Others strengthened safety rules. New international agreements were created to improve transparency and cooperation. For the first time, many realized that a disaster in one place could threaten lives far beyond national borders. The idea of shared responsibility became impossible to ignore. Yet even with new rules, the core lesson remained uncomfortable. Technology advances faster than human ethics. Systems become complex, but decision-making often stays political. When warnings are inconvenient, they are ignored. When truth threatens power, it is delayed. Chernobyl exposed this pattern with brutal clarity. The destroyed reactor was eventually sealed under massive structures designed to contain the radiation. Engineers called it a success of modern science. But no structure can fully contain the memory of what happened. Concrete can block particles, not lessons. The real containment must happen in human thinking. Today, tourists visit the exclusion zone. They walk through empty classrooms and silent streets. Some see it as history. Others see it as curiosity. But beneath every photograph is a question. How did this happen? And could it happen again? The answer is never simple, and that is what makes it dangerous. Chernobyl forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about systems we trust, about experts we assume are always right, about governments we expect to protect us. It reminds us that progress without accountability is fragile, and silence can be as destructive as any explosion. This story matters because it is unfinished. The effects continue. The responsibility continues. Every generation inherits the consequences of choices made before them. Whether those consequences repeat depends on what is remembered and what is ignored. Chernobyl is not a warning carved in stone. It is a warning written in human experience. It asks us to question authority, demand transparency, and value human life above pride or power. It reminds us that the most dangerous failures are not mechanical, but moral. And as long as technology shapes the future of humanity, the quiet lesson of Chernobyl remains. When truth is delayed, disaster arrives early. Long after the alarms stopped and the borders reopened, the damage continued in ways that were harder to see. Radiation altered landscapes slowly. Forests absorbed contamination. Rivers carried particles far from their source. Food chains were affected, and entire regions had to rethink how they lived, farmed, and survived. The disaster reshaped daily life not through explosions, but through invisible limits. For many people, the hardest part was uncertainty. Radiation does not come with clear timelines. It does not announce when it is gone. Parents worried about their children's futures without knowing what questions to ask. Scientists could offer probabilities, not guarantees. Living with that uncertainty became its own burden. Chernobyl also revealed how fragile public trust can be. Once people realized that information had been withheld, every official statement was questioned. Even accurate data was doubted. This loss of trust did not stay local. It affected how societies viewed authority, expertise, and official narratives. Rebuilding trust proved far more difficult than rebuilding structures. The disaster became a turning point in global awareness. Media coverage, once limited and controlled, slowly expanded. Survivors began to speak. Researchers gained access to archives. Stories that had been suppressed surfaced years later. Each new detail added depth to a tragedy the world thought it already understood. At the same time, Chernobyl became a symbol, not only of nuclear risk, but of systemic failure. It showed what happens when workers are pressured to meet expectations instead of question them. When hierarchy matters more than safety. When admitting a mistake is considered more dangerous than the mistake itself. Future generations now study Chernobyl not just as an accident, but as a case study. Engineers analyzed the technical flaws. Historians examine the political decisions. Sociologists explore the human response to invisible danger. Every field finds its own lesson, yet all point to the same conclusion. Disasters are rarely caused by a single moment. They are built over time. The exclusion zone remains, a physical reminder of consequences that cannot be undone. Time has softened its edges, but not erased its meaning. Nature adapts, but adaptation is not forgiveness. The land remembers, even when people try not to. Chernobyl challenges a common belief that humanity always learns from its mistakes. Learning is not automatic. It requires honesty, memory, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Without those, history does not repeat itself exactly. It evolves. This is why Chernobyl still matters. Not because it was the worst, but because it was avoidable. It stands as evidence that intelligence alone is not enough. Without responsibility, transparency, and courage, even the most advanced systems can fail silently. The story does not end with ruins or radiation levels. It continues in every discussion about energy, safety, and power. It continues each time a warning is ignored or a truth is delayed. It continues in the choices societies make when faced with risk. Chernobyl is a reminder that the greatest dangers are often unseen until it is too late, and that the future depends not on what we build, but on how honestly we are willing to look at what has already happened. The impact of Chernobyl also reached deep into culture and identity. For many people, it changed how they understood their relationship with the state and with science. Faith in official promises weakened. The idea that experts always know best was replaced by doubt and caution. This shift did not happen overnight, but slowly, as stories accumulated and silence became impossible to ignore. Education systems began to include Chernobyl as a lesson, not just in physics or engineering, but in ethics. Students learned that numbers and calculations are never neutral. Behind every technical decision stand human values, pressures, and fears. Chernobyl showed that even a small decision, made under stress or obedience, can contribute to irreversible consequences. Families carried the memory in personal ways. Some kept photographs of homes they would never return to. Others avoided speaking about the past altogether. Trauma expressed itself differently across generations. Silence became a form of inheritance, passed down not through words, but through behavior, anxiety, and unspoken fear. International cooperation slowly improved because of the disaster. New monitoring systems were created. Information sharing became more structured. Early warning networks were developed to prevent future secrecy. Yet these systems depend on human honesty. Technology can detect radiation, but it cannot force truth. Chernobyl also changed how the world thinks about time. Most disasters are measured in days or years. Chernobyl is measured in decades and centuries. Some materials released that night will remain dangerous longer than any political system, longer than any promise ever made. This forces a rare kind of thinking